Namaste. Thank you for tuning in to this discussion, Sustainable Dharma, a Model for the Future. My name is Milan Nakum, and I'm part of the London Zone campus team from the National Committee of NHSF UK. And I'm pleased to welcome you to the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020. The National Hindu Students Forum UK was founded in 1991 with a vision to bring students together to protect, preserve, practice, and promote Hindu Dharma. Today, NHSF UK societies across the country keep this vision alive. This conference, the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020, is a celebration of Hindu identity and how dharmic values can be integrated with everyday life to build a better world. Today, we are here to discuss Dharma. What is Dharma? How can we channel it in every aspect of our everyday lives? It is an honor to present to you our first speaker, Brahmacharini Shripriya Chaitanya, a graduate of politics from the University of York. She has spent time in India both as a student and teacher with the Chinmaya Mission, and since has taken the vow to live as a Brahmacharini, which means a devoted female student who lives in an ashram with her guru along with other students. She now teaches daily for the Chinmaya Mission UK. Shripriya, welcome. I'm also delighted to introduce our second speaker, Dr. T.H.E.S.E. Sutton. After completing his doctoral thesis on the Mahabharata at Lancaster University, T.H.E.S.E. has lectured at a number of British universities on Sanskrit literature, Indian religion and culture. He is presently Director of Continuing Education at the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies. He has recently written several commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita and Yoga Sutras. T.H.E.S.E., a big welcome to you too, and welcome to These 2020. Before diving into the discussion, I'd just like to remind the audience, please do pop any questions into YouTube live chat, and hope you enjoy this discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to dive straight into it. I want to ask the first question to T.H.E.S.E. What is Dharma? What does it mean? And how can we define it?
Okay, how long do you want me to give my answer for? I'll try and do it in 2 minutes. Dharma has a number of different meanings. Philosophically, it means something that is real. But generally speaking, in the early text, Dharma means right action, living in the proper way. But of course, this is then refined under the headings of duty, responsibility, following the rules of Shastra, or ultimately, I think, pure virtue. And in the Mahabharata, and also I think it's the spiritual path, perhaps Dharma in the Buddhist sense of the path towards enlightenment, the moksha dharma. And it's in the Mahabharata we see that these different interpretations of Dharma interpreted, and also the potential tensions between them, so that you've got Bhim, who epitomizes Dharma as social duty, and you've got Yudhishthira, who epitomizes Dharma as pure virtue, and sometimes the two, it's hard to reconcile the two between them. But I think from our point of view in the modern world, we can see we have certain duties and responsibilities to our community, to our family, to our society as a whole, and to all living beings. And we have to accept that responsibility. That's the message of the Gita. But higher than that, beyond just acting out of duty, is the idea of pure virtue, which really means a transformation of the consciousness, so that Dharma isn't just the way that you live. Dharma is what you are. In the Gita, Krishna speaks of Dharmatma, which means your whole being is imbued with Dharma. So you do what is right, not because there's a rule book that tells you to, but because that's what you are. You are a person who instinctively does the right thing. And I think that would be the definition of dharma that is most useful for us. And of course, dharma then becomes part of moksha. Could I read one sloka from the Mahabharata, a translation? And there are several of these, but it says, never displaying malice towards any living being through actions, thoughts, or words, acts of kindness, giving in charity. This is Sanatana Dharma. So it's really compassion, and compassion isn't just what you do, but compassion is what you are. So in that sense, dharma becomes central to the whole spiritual pursuit of the Hindu religious traditions. Without dharma, there is no moksha. There's no real spirituality within it at all. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas G. That was wow, that was very well explained. Shripriya Ji, do you want to add on?
Sure. I think that was a very comprehensive, a great kind of exposition of dharma. A different definition, well, it's not really different, but an idea of dharma that is generally accepted by, so there are 6 main schools of thought within Indian, the Indian Vedic tradition, you could say. And one that is kind of widely accepted is a definition that was put forth by a school called the Vaisheshika school. And there, how dharma is defined is yataha abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhihi. So here, what it means is dharma is yataha, that by which or from which there is siddhi, the attainment of, abhyudaya and nishreyasa, 2 things. So abhyudaya, you can split it into 2, and it becomes abhi udaya in Sanskrit. Abhi means all around, kind of in all directions. And udaya means rise or upliftment. So there, what we find is dharma is that by which we attain all-round prosperity and well-being. In other words, if we follow dharma, if we act according to dharma, we will attain complete prosperity and well-being in the world. Not only that, but also nishreyasa. Shreyas means that which is good, right? But good is a relevant, relative term. So what is good for me, for example, may not necessarily be good for you, may not necessarily be good for another person. But nishreyasa means the absolute good. And absolute good means that which is good for everybody at all times, in all circumstances, in all places. In other words, according to the tradition to which I belong, Advaita Vedanta, nishreyasa means self-realization. And that is the attainment of that which is beyond this world. The knowledge of that truth, which is, you could say, pervasive in this creation, but also beyond. In other words, dharma leads us to material kind of prosperity and well-being within the world, but it also helps us to attain that which is beyond this world, that which is the absolute good for everybody, and that which actually everybody is striving for when we're looking for happiness and peace. Really what we're looking for is knowledge of our own self, which is infinite, which is this truth. And dharma is that which allows us to know ourselves.
Thank you, Shripriya Ji. That was really nice, and diving a little bit deeper into the self and wealth. And I think we'll touch on that in just a minute. But as you were breaking down some of the Sanskrit terms you were using, is there a similar etymological breakdown for dharma, Shripriya ji?
Right. So this word dharma is, it can be broken down in different ways. But generally how we can look at it is dharma is that which sustains or upholds, which is from this root dhri in Sanskrit. So that gives us a very kind of broad definition of dharma, which encompasses all sorts of ideas, because it's just saying it's that which will sustain, uphold, which will also bring unity and harmony.
Thank you, Shripriya ji. So just diving a little bit deeper into both of what you said, I think both of you touched on prosperity and wealth at some point. So I just wanted to pick on, can dharma and the modern day pursuit of wealth go hand in hand? And what does that look like? Nicholas G, do you want to come in here?
Yes, sure. I mean, what you're referring to is the Four Purushatas, the four goals of life, which are put forward in the ancient texts. They certainly, they're in the introduction to the Mahabharata, and they are karma, the enjoyment of pleasure; artha, developing prosperity; dharma, living in the proper way; and then moksha, which was what Shripriya was talking about, really, the moksha dharma. And I think the point would be, it's an interesting phrase that Krishna uses in the Gita, chapter 7, verse 11, when he's talking about the way he pervades the world. He says, Kamosmi Bharatarshaba, O best of the Bharats, I am karma, I am the desire for pleasure, because it's a major feature of the world. But he qualifies that by saying, Dharma avirudha bhuteshu, that I am that karma, that quest for pleasure and desire, that is dharma avirudha, that doesn't transgress dharma. So the point would be that, yes, karma is to be pursued. Pleasure is one of the things we can enjoy in the world. Artha, there's no great merit in poverty except for the sadhus and renunciants. We don't want to be poor, but our desire for pleasure, our desire for prosperity must be mixed, sanitized, if you like, by dharma. Where, and if we can define dharma, other words, compassion is the essence of dharma. It's also stated in the Mahabharata. And therefore, if our desire for pleasure, our desire and our search for prosperity isn't combined, sanitized by that mood of compassion, then it simply becomes a source of degradation. We become rampant materialists, greedy, selfish, cruel individuals, such as are described in chapter 16 of the Gita, where Krishna parodies such people. Idamajja maya labdam, I've got so much, etc. So therefore, if we don't want to become a person like that, always when we are becoming prosperous, always when we're seeking pleasure, that dharmic value of compassion must be kept to the fore as the moderating force. If we make wealth, wonderful, but some of that wealth must go to those who are most in need. We must be compassionate, wealthy people. And if that dharma is mixed with artha, then wonderful things can be done. You see, if you are a wealthy person, you have the power to not just talk about dharma, but to execute dharma. Dharma is very, very practical. You know, it's like, it's being in the world, it's feeding people, it's serving people. So if we have an accumulation of wealth, then feed more people, serve more people, help more people, guarantee their health, cure their eye problems, like that. And it's only when dharma is the guiding force behind karma and artha that these two goals of life do in fact become legitimate. Where karma and artha are divorced from dharma, then they are simply sources of degradation. One sinks down to become, as the Gita says, the lowest of men. Nara Ardhama is the person who cares nothing for others. And similarly, the goals that Shripriya was talking about of enlightenment, realization, there's no chance of ever going on that path if one is just devoid of that compassion. So I think that's the important point, and why I believe that Dharma is central to all the other three. It's central to karma, it's central to artha, and it's also central to moksha. The Gita, the opening chapters of the Gita are so insistent upon that. Yes, pursue moksha, but don't neglect the other world. Loka sangrahamevapi sampasyan, thinking of the well-being of the world, kartamarhasi. Krishna says, you must take action for the sake of the welfare of the world. Otherwise, your spirituality is just, I don't know, it has no value. I was thinking of this book I found on my shelf, Practical Vedanta. It's probably backwards, isn't it, on the screen? Swami Vivekananda. What he says is Vedanta is going out and working in the world, doing things for people. Years ago, I went to the Ramakrishna Mission in Tiruvananthapuram. I had some business there, and I expected to find an ashram or a temple, but in fact, when I got there, it was a hospital, and the sadhu who was there was fixing up appointments for people to be cured. This is practical Vedanta. That's what Vivekananda emphasizes. Vedanta isn't some otherworldly, ethereal, esoteric thing. Vedanta means what you do, how you help people, what you do for people, feeding people, like that. So anyway, sorry, that's a bit of a long answer, but
thank you, Nicholas.
Got me going there.
That was very nice. That was nicely expanded. Maybe Shripriya ji, you can come in here. But is there, so Nicholas ji touched on the Four Purushatas. Is there a kind of guide? Is it a split, 25% each? Or how do we really know how to kind of rein in artha and kama?
So I think, as mentioned already, it's kind of these four Purusharthas are speaking not to instruct us. They are not being imposed on us, but they are framed in such a way as to accommodate for the impulses that people already have in this world, right? So people naturally want to kind of enjoy pleasures. And therefore the Vedas say, okay, think of this as your kama purushartha. People naturally want to accrue wealth for various reasons. And that is then spoken of as the artha purushartha. So what the kind of, how we decide, right? Which is, I think, what you're asking, how, how much of which
that's
one?
Right.
The thing is that artha and kama will come to us naturally. The things that we have to strive for are dharma and moksha. And as already mentioned by Nicholas ji, that the importance of dharma is that when we practice it with relation to artha and kama, it stops us from being consumed by those pursuits. It allows us room to actually achieve more. Because if we look for kama and artha without the support of dharma, that will become our entire life. Whereas if we pursue them on the basis of dharma, we will always know where we are. We will have that proper kind of perspective to lead us in, but also lead us out. So we know how much to engage, how much time to dedicate to each of them.
Sure, thanks, Shripriya ji. And just on that, you said artha and kama come naturally to us, and I do believe so. I agree there, very much so. And that's probably very particular to each individual, so it'll be quite different, everyone's artha and kama. Does that mean also dharma in a similar way is quite personalized for the individual, or can it be?
So we have in the Bhagavad Gita also, Sri Krishna talks about swadharma, or he mentions swadharma. And in fact, it's important to know one's own dharma, because he says, paradharmo bhayavaha. It is sort of, it's frightful. It's something that will give fear if we try and follow someone else's dharma. So there are different ways of, as we saw right at the beginning, because there are so many different ways of defining dharma, there are different ways of understanding swadharma also. But how we can take it, or how we can understand it, is that it's two things coming together, swadharma. It is passion and it is aptitude. When we find these two things and we are able to bring them together in a very practical sense, this is swadharma, right? Then we find that which we are able to be guided by in our lives. And it actually makes it easier for us to live in this world and perform action. So what I mean here is, so say, for example, as a child, somebody loves being in nature, right? Okay, so they're passionate about nature. And in terms of their aptitude, they're naturally very observant. They are very methodical. They are very careful, right? So when you put these two things together and you think, okay, practically, where can I apply both of these things? You can come up with a way to spend your life that will allow you to express these things, and therefore will make it a joy to be in this world and to act. Whereas if someone has those tendencies and thinks, you know what, I'm going to become an accountant, then you're denying part of yourself. And the point of swadharma is that we are able to live in this world in such a way that we derive joy, but we are also able to contribute to the context that we live in. So in that sense, swadharma requires kind of introspection and for us to recognize, right, what's natural to us. But in terms of what is called samanya dharma, right, and that means general dharma, that is the same for everybody. And this is in terms of those virtues, right? We expect, or we hope for, the same virtues to be practiced by everyone, because that is the kind of world that we hope to live in. So compassion, charity, honesty, etc. Those things are the same for everybody. They are similar no matter what context we are functioning in.
Wow, thank you, Shripriya ji. And just touching on, you mentioned knowing your own dharma and self-realization a little bit as well. How do we go about this introspection? Is it kind of over years, or can we sit down and just do it? Is there a process? Do you recommend anything?
I think it requires a lot of reflection, and it may take time. And for some of us, we'll be able to recognize it instantly, and for some, it will take more sort of deeper introspection. But I think reflecting on, and these are really simple things, reflecting on what we've always enjoyed, right? Reflecting on what is it if I were asked to do through the night without sleeping? What would I be happy to kind of give up my sleep or my food for? What is it that when I engage myself in that activity, I forget myself and I forget people around me? So these kinds of questions can help us to figure out our swadharma.
Thanks, Shripriya ji. And I think I'll bring in Nicholas ji here. Just touching on something Shripriya ji has mentioned, is knowing is one thing, I think. But Nicholas ji, is there a difference between actually knowing and carrying out or living by dharma?
Yes, yes, indeed. I mean, speaking personally, I know what dharma is. I've got verses here in the book that tell me what dharma is. I don't think dharma is an absolute. When we talk about compassion or talk about charity, interesting in Katha Upanishad, where Mrityu meets with Nachiketas, Mrityu says there are two things: there's the Shreyas and the Prayas. The Prayas is what is pleasing to us, the Shreyas is what is right. So I can know what right is, but the extent to which I can pursue that path of dharma is limited by my own impurities, mala. According to the Shaivite text, we have impurities within us. And there's no point feeling guilty about that. It's just a quest to go towards the Shreyas and do a little bit less of the prayer. So if I'm somewhat compassionate, somewhat uncompassionate, somewhat charitable, somewhat uncharitable, then just do it a little more, little more, little more. There's no failure. There's only degrees of success in dharma. So if you're doing dharma already, good. Do it a little more, then a little more, a little more. If you're giving charity, give a little more. So I know in my life, I have a lot of prosperity, not relative to the rest of the people in this country, but for me, I'm prosperous enough. And I could give away more of my money. And I should give away more of my money. I should help people more than I do. So what do? I try and do a little bit more all the time. And so I now do more than I did a few years ago, and then do a little more all the time. So I think the absolute of dharma, like Gandhi says about ahimsa, he said, perfect ahimsa doesn't exist in the real world. It's like Euclid's point, it's a concept. So in the same way, the perfection of dharma, perfect compassion, perfect ahimsa, perfect charitableness, perfectly benign, will be found only in the absolute perfect sadhu, one who is fully spiritually realized. So therefore our aim is to accept. I've got so much towards the doing the right thing and so much deviated to doing what is pleasing to me. Let's just try and shift the balance a little bit more away from artha and karma, and a little bit more towards dharma. And that will be enriching for ourselves, enriching for the world, and it will also open up the gateway to moksha. Krishna says that in the Gita, chapter 7, verse 28. How do I become free from the illusion of duality? How do I get to the position where I can be a worshipper of Krishna? Tvantagatam papam, stop doing the wrong thing. Jananam punya karmanam, do the right thing. That's the way to the perfect knowledge in that path to liberation. It's also the means of devotion, the path of bhakti. Shiv Puran says, how do you worship Shiva? It doesn't say worship the linga, it says freeing all living beings from from fear, acts of kindness. That's Shivasya Aradhanam. That's how you worship Shiva. That's the most pleasing thing to Shiva. Just as a father is pleased when you bring pleasure to his son and free his sons and grandsons and family members from fear, so Shiva is most pleased when you provide help to other living beings. That's bhakti. Pure bhakti is feeding people. The awakening of Gyan is feeding people. That's all.
Thank you, Nicholas G. And it was nice to hear you bring similarities actually from different schools of thoughts and traditions. And it sounds that like there's more similarities in the sense of actually being compassionate, serving others, and those core values. And actually there's a question from the YouTube live that is quite apt for this particular question, kind of few points that we've been going across. And it's from Puja. And it's, what if the pursuit of prosperity and wealth challenges your dharma? For example, in the finance sector or healthcare, when facing a moral dilemma at work, how do you work around this? Shripriya ji, do you want to come in here first?
Sure. So I think this is, it's such a kind of a sort of widespread thing that we find is that very often in the careers that we enter into, in the sort of our jobs, we find conflict, and I think here it's important to think of, whenever we're trying to decide, right? Whenever we're trying to decide between two options, whenever we're trying to figure out what's the right thing or the wrong thing, it's always helpful to have something to measure it by. In the sense, if I know what my goal is, then I have something by which I can assess the situation in front of me. So when we come across these conflicts, whether it's at work or in our personal lives, I think it's always helpful to ask this question: what is my goal? Right? Mm-hmm. And if my goal is to live in dharma, to be dharmic, and I want to do so in an uncompromising way, then we have to find a way to make sure that within that situation, we have done our best to act according to dharma. The outcome may be something different. The outcome may not be something that I can determine. But the important thing is, what can I do which will put my own mind at rest that I have done the right thing? And I think it will make it easier for us to make this choice when we are clear about what our purpose is and what our goal is. If my goal is to make my company happy, then I know what I need to do. If my goal is to live according to dharma, then that will also help me assess.
And Nicholas G, do you want to also weigh in to this question?
It's such a difficult question. I think as well, if you read the Mahabharata narrative, that is a question that is central all the time. With Yudhishthira is a Kshatriya, he has a duty to perform, which seems to conflict with his inherent sense of dharma, which he says. So, and we're shown Yudhishthira caught up in this dilemma. He's caught up in it. Should he gamble? As a Kshatriya, he has to gamble. He can't refuse it. But as a man of pure virtue, of dharma, it all goes horribly wrong. And likewise in the battle, he hates doing it. He just loathes warfare. Kshatriya dharma paposti, Steve, he says. Kshatriya dharma is nothing but wickedness, sin, papa. So the Mahabharata is wonderful for that, because it doesn't give you a simple answer. It just shows you the dilemma. Look at this, look at that. Now you have to think about it. And all one can say is that we have intelligence, we have integrity. And if you try to apply that, then more often than not, you will reach the right decision. But integrity is such important. And don't lie to yourself. Don't make excuses. Don't pretend that doing what is pleasing is actually right. There's so much moral discussion is based on that self-justification, but we have to be realistic. And if we're not doing what dharma dictates, then accept that, try and do more. I would say, however, looking back in my life, there are decisions that I made which were prioritizing the artha over the dharma, and I deeply regret that now. There are times when I should have spoken up and said things, should have done things which I knew to be right, but it was such a difficult position to be in that I just didn't have the inner strength to do it. And looking back, I just wish I'd had that inner strength, but it's not easy. There's no simple answers, but always try as hard as you can to put dharma to the fore. And if it's at all possible, sometimes it's not an either or situation. Sometimes there's matters of degree. Try and make it a little bit more towards dharma, a little bit less towards artha. Try and, if you're in the financial sector, do it as honestly as is conceivably possible. And we all know that, we've had experience, haven't we? But we shouldn't name any financial companies, but they know who they are. And they've done, in Greece and places like that, they've devastated the economy simply for selfish gain. I would say in that situation where so many people are going to be made to suffer, you have to draw the line and say, this is adharma. Even if it means you walk out on your job and your career, there are certain lines are just pure wickedness, pure adharma. And those lines can't be crossed. But you have intelligence, you have integrity, you have to rely on your own decisions. Krishna says at the end of the Gita, what is it? T.H.E.S.E tatakaru. Now, Arjuna, you must follow your own. You must follow what you see as the best thing. It's not easy. There's no simple answers to these things.
Wow, thank you, Nicholas G. That was very nicely explained. I like the example that you gave from the Mahabharata about gambling, and from your personal experience, and actually to stand up to injustice when adharma is going on, and you're kind of bringing in resilience and courage and standing up for the right things. So thank you for those thoughts. We'll move on to another question from the YouTube Live from Akshaya Rajangam. In both definitions of the word dharma, the word Hindu does not appear. In this case, what is the link between Hinduism and dharma? Shripriya ji, do you want to come in there first?
So I'm not a historian by any means, but what I will say is that generally what we call Hinduism, which in itself is a huge thing, is what is otherwise referred to as Sanatana Dharma. Right? So what we understand as Hinduism, and the thing is that within Hinduism, there are so many different traditions. Even in the course of this discussion, we've touched on several different traditions that have ideas on what is dharma. There are so many different traditions. There's a bee that has come to visit me. There are so many different traditions, but they are all coming under this umbrella of what we call Hinduism. So I don't think in the Vedas themselves that this word is found, but this is how the tradition is referred. But I think maybe Nicholas, you may have a better or more insight on this.
Okay. Thanks, Shripriya. One of the meanings of dharma in its philosophical sense, as used by Buddhists and others, it means an object that is fully real, but it also means the defining quality of an object, so that the dharma of the sun is heat and light, because heating and lighting is what makes sun, if you see what I mean. So dharma is essentially what makes us human. It is humanity. And people sometimes say when they're greedy, selfish or whatever, it's just human nature. But actually it's the opposite of that. To be pure, virtuous, compassionate, loving towards other is what it means to be fully human. That's the point. To be human is to be enlightened, compassionate towards all. The point I'm getting round to is that this isn't about Hindus or non-Hindus. This is about the essence of humanity, whether you call it Hindu or call it anything else. It doesn't matter. Shripriya said it's Sanatan. Sanatan means eternal and universal. These teachings aren't just for Hindus. They are the very essence of humanity. These are the teachings that all people must follow, that to make out, to fulfill, to reach the fullness of our humanity, if nothing else. That is what Dharma is about. So it's not that this is Hindus, this is Sanatan Dharma, universal Dharma, absolute truths for all people, all times, all places. That's the meaning, I think. Do you think that's right, Shripriya?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Well, great answers from both of you, and thank you for those. Time has flown by, and we would love to continue this discussion, but it is time to bring this exploration to somewhat of a close. And I'm sure this is just the beginning for a lot of us at home. So please do continue this discussion with your friends, families, and in your networks. I think summarizing this discussion is probably a bit too difficult for me. So I'm going to pass that on to both of you, and you'll have 60 seconds or under just to cover your key takeaways and highlights of this session for our students at home. So Shripriya ji, do you want to start, please?
Okay, so I think one of the main things that we can all take away is that if we are able to make Dharma the basis, the foundation of who we are and how we think and how we act, then we are doing so much good, not only to ourselves, but also to everyone around us. And there are so many ways, so many avenues for us to discover what is Dharma. So we shouldn't feel that it's impossible to learn about, because it is possible to gain an insight into what is Dharma. And it's also something that really is there for us not only to learn about, but to practice and to transform our own lives. And it's not something that needs any qualification to begin. Everyone can make the choice, to whatever degree, to be dharmic and to contribute to the world around us.
Thank you, Shripriya ji. Nicholas ji, over to you.
Yes, I was looking through an old diary of mine a few weeks ago, 1974, and it was written whilst I was traipsing around India with barely a rupee in my pocket. I saw one of the entries said, "When I get back to England, I'm going to get a job and give all my money away to help people." And looking back at that image of that young person there, I think this is my guru, and I just hope that I haven't betrayed that young person who was me. And by that I mean, when we're younger, idealism is very much, I think, a part of most of us, our identity. So what I would say is that idealism is a longing for Dharma. And all that you can ask is, don't lose that. Don't ever lose that. Keep to it. Life will throw up all sorts of things, careers, families, etc. But throughout all the transformations, cling tightly to Dharma as you would cling to a lover. Just keep it always in your heart. And I sometimes look at a picture of this weird looking young fellow coming back from India weighing about 7 stone after a long bout of dysentery. I just hope that I haven't let him down in my life, that I've been able to preserve the values that he's teaching me now. So that's all I'd ask. Just keep Dharma closer than the closest thing throughout life. That's all.
Thank you both for those very, very heartfelt final thoughts. I just want to take this opportunity once more to thank you both, Nicholas ji, Shripriya ji, for joining us today to discuss Dharma and diving a bit deeper. And for everyone at home, I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this session and have something more to take away from this weekend. As I mentioned at the start of the session, this is just one session that has been hosted by T.H.E.S.E UK. And on the website, do join us for the rest of today. So there will be 2 panel discussions happening. From Twitter to television, telling our story at 2:30. And also New Zealand, New York to New Zealand, our global future at 4 p.m. These can be found on our website, www.nhsef.org.uk/these-2020. Please do check out other links and other sessions that have gone on across this weekend. I'm sure you will enjoy these too. Pranam and Namaste.